So welcome to the Frontline Club this evening, where we are gathered to discuss a very brave and important man, Alaa, with his sisters, Sanaa and Mona, and we'll get on to that in a moment. But before I talk about him, I'd like to talk about somebody else for reasons which I think will become immediately apparent. I've just come straight over from my LBC show, where a few weeks ago I interviewed a man called Vladimir Karamurza, who is a Russian dissident. And like Alaa, I think wouldn't mind being described as an intellectual and a writer and a thinker, someone with a very strong sense of history. And he was very eloquent and tough in his denunciation of Putin and Putin's dictatorial regime. And we discussed it for a while, and then towards the end of the conversation I said to him, "So, Vladimir, what are you going to do now?" He said, "Oh, I've got to get a plane back to Moscow." And I said, "You're going back to Moscow?" And he said, "Yes, I'm going back to Moscow." I said, "But you're absolutely mad. They'll arrest you, they'll grab you, and they'll throw you in jail." And he said, "Yes, that's possible." And so I said, "Why are you going back to Moscow then, if you know that's going to happen?" He said, "Because I'm a Russian, and I'm not going to let these people have my country." These people being the regime and everything it is. And I suspect that's the same kind of sentiment that Alaa would recognize in relation to Egypt. What happened, I have to say, to Vladimir is he went back and he was arrested, and he's now facing 10 years in Russian jail at the very, very least. And I had his wife, Yevgenia, on the program, and she's beginning a campaign which I'm sure one day will end up in the Frontline Club with a gathering like this one. So all around the world, we're told that the great struggle is going on across Ukraine and in Europe for democracy and freedom. But wherever we have got the opportunity to do something, we have an absolute moral obligation to get involved, because there is one other thing that links Vladimir and Alaa. They are both British citizens, and therefore they need the protection and the help of the British state, and for reasons that I don't entirely understand at the moment, and I don't want to be conspiratorial about it. It's quite often the case that British embassies around the world are not providing quite the support and attention and the consulates that we need in these cases. Now, we're going to start our conversation in a moment. The other thing that's really important for me to say is Alaa is clearly a very, very important, probably the most important activist and pro-democracy campaigner in his region, and he's also a very, very fine writer. I am a devotee and indeed a collector of good political books, and I like them to be beautifully produced. And without saying any more, this is a very, very beautifully produced. You have not yet been defeated. And it's a gorgeous book, so I encourage you, if you possibly can afterwards, to go and buy a copy. They're on sale right at the back, and well worth it. So thank you very much indeed. Mona, let me start with you. Can you remember when Alaa began to become an actor?
That was a long time ago. Me, Sanaa and Alaa, on different occasions, the three of us were actually not very active politically. This was our way of rebelling against our parents. So you guys are so interested in politics, you are human rights defenders. No, we are not interested. And each one of us got hooked in a different way. So Alaa, I think it was 2005 when there was like parliamentary elections during Hosni Mubarak's era, and my mother, well, as she always does, she was out in the street monitoring elections and trying to help. And a lot of people were beaten up, and a lot of women in particularly were assaulted by the police. And Alaa was checking on Mama back then, and they broke his glasses and they stole his laptop. So suddenly he felt like he's part of the fight. But he wasn't really active until 2000. He wasn't that active until 2006. He has always been interested in blogging and in writing, and he had created with Manal, his wife and the mother of Khaled, an aggregator for Egyptian and Arab bloggers. And in 2006 there was a movement of independence of judiciary in Egypt, led by two judges who were actively trying to stand against the handling and the control of Mubarak's state of the judiciary. And so Alaa and other bloggers interested in following politics, and we actually have some of them here now, some of the bloggers who were covering back then, Abd Mahmoud and other friends, organized solidarity protests in front of the Judiciary Club, and this was the first time Alaa gets arrested. This was the first time I know as an adult what it is to be a sister of a political prisoner. He spent 45 days back then, and I thought this was unimaginable. I couldn't imagine that we'd have years of this later on. And I think since then he transformed.
Sanaa, what kind of kid was he when he was growing up? Tell us about him.
The age difference between us is very big, so
So you don't really
he's
remember?
much older than me. He's
All right.
13 years older than me.
Terrible question.
But
You should have got a professional in. I'm really sorry.
What he was to me as a child, he had many roles. So he wasn't just big brother. He would also kind of become like a parent figure. He was like him and my father were like my biggest supporters. I changed my mind every day about what I wanted to do. I was a bit bohemian and artistic, so today I like sculpting, tomorrow I like painting, and
Panda. She wanted to be a doctor, specifically vet with pandas.
and every supported that. Every interest in that, like I wanted the family to take seriously, so obviously my mother was like, well, let's just give it 2 days sleeping. but Alaa was actually always supporting. So when I wanted to do sculpting, he would take me. He took me to some place where I learned sculpting, breakdance. He took me, and when I finally discovered my actual passion, which was film editing, nobody really believed this time it is the right one. So he was the only one where he was kind of advocating for the family. This time it seems serious. We need to kind of support her.
And he was always a techie. I mean, he was of the generation who kind of grew up a bit on the internet, or not? Because a lot of his campaigning has been online, and he's done a lot of work online.
Yes, he was always a techie. So Alaa taught me logic gates when I was 5. I used to play Warcraft. That's before World of Warcraft. He used to sit on his lap or on my father's lap to kind of reach the. He was always techie, and it was at a time where it wasn't. I don't know about outside Egypt, but it wasn't very computers weren't that accessible. But we happened to come from this family of academics, so my grandfather, I think, had a computer like in the office of the
Our uncle
university.
as well, because
And our
he's
uncle. And so he was lucky to have access early on, and that was his thing.
He's always been a techie, he's always been a geek and a nerd, and I swear, and he's always loved reading on all sorts of things. So what Sanaa was saying about how he would support any interest of hers, this applies to each and every one of us. I think Alaa is the only one in my family who read anything I did in my work, who read.
Understands what you do.
Exactly, he's the only one who understands what I do. He understands Mama's work, so he reads on everything: mathematics, science, arts. It's like his thing.
And the internet gives, of course, a portal into alternative possibilities, other ways of living in different societies. So anyone who is going to rebel against the regime or the society they're inside has to have a model of alternatives out there, I guess. Take us back to the sort of Tahrir Square moment, talk a little bit about the optimism that suddenly explodes across your country.
It was a moment of possibility. It's what people like my parents were working on and dreaming of, and when it actually came, nobody kind of knew what to do, because although this is what they've been like working on and advocating for their lives, but when it actually came, it seemed like nobody was prepared. And back then Alaa had moved to South Africa, and he was establishing a life. He had just bought like this big house and we're moving. He had been in South Africa, I think, for over a year.
I think around 2 years.
Yeah, but he was suddenly getting settled. He was because when you were talking about the internet, the way his engagement and he saw that there is a big problem, that there is no Arabic content on the internet, and it's very hard. Back then it was really hard to kind of to have portals or Arabic content. So Alaa worked a lot on what we call localization, which is translating, but it's also like translating tools and user interfaces. And his work on localization became kind of important, and so therefore he found work in South Africa. He was offered a job in South Africa to kind of help with
with the languages there, with the diverse languages and native languages there, of incorporating them with.
So Alaa was in South Africa. He had like a very good job, and his life was. And when the uprising happened, he became absolutely inspired, and so they jumped on a plane and came over, and because in South Africa he was very because this is what he does. He reads about the country's history and he engages, and so he was really inspired by the process they had with the Freedom Charter and how they wrote their constitution. So this is. So Alaa, when he came back to Egypt, and he started this campaign and this petition to kind of rewrite our constitution that was inspired from the South African experience. So yeah, it was this kind of mindset.
What would have happened to Alaa had your country had a normal democratic government, or had it been able to make the same kind of transition that South Africa did, and he'd been able to be something other than a political dissident?
He would have been completely, highly respected writer. He would have been following and involved in his work as a software developer. Alaa has always been very active. His main thing was always also about access of knowledge and access of information, and allowing different people to the internet not just to be a platform for just writing, but also for them to use the different tools for self-expression and for organizing and for discussion and for arguing and so on. So yeah, he would have been a great addition. He's still trying. So even like now when he's in prison, if you look at what he says to the what's on record when he was being interrogated by the state security prosecution, you'd find that his mind is still occupied with how do we come out of this? How can we be inclusive? How is it that all, and when he says all, he talks about the state and all parties and individuals and everywhere. So he is the most, I think him and my mother are the two most in our family who were very engaged in public work, and who are very engaged in including everyone and reaching out to everyone.
And so instead of that life he could have had, he's in prison. And I think I'm right in saying he has been imprisoned by all the three regimes which have followed Tahrir Square.
Well, the Muslim Brotherhood were not in power long enough to jail him, but they started cases against him. And
I think that kind of counts.
It counts. So every regime prosecuted him. This is for sure. This one of the sad things about is that one of the cases that started during Mohamed Morsi's era actually. It ended up being tried during Sisi, and Morsi was added to the same case. So it's like Alaa's journey with courts and prosecution, I think, tells you not just the story of the history of how things are evolving in Egypt, but the absurdity of it.
And tell us a little bit about the conditions he's endured in prison. I was talking to Adaf earlier in the week, and she said actually the new prison that he's in is much better than where he was before.
Two aspects to that. Maximum security prison 2, where he has just been removed a couple of days ago, is a horrible prison in itself. And the way it is run it is completely run by state security. It does not follow any single part of the law. So in itself, any prisoner there is being exposed to human rights violations and legal violations on a daily basis. But the other thing is part of the
Sorry, just to pause you there. We're talking about no access to natural light a lot of the time, no access to reading materials.
Yeah, but that's what I was going to say. These are active decisions to deprive him. So this is not as if this prison doesn't have sunlight or doesn't have a yard. It has a yard and a sunlight. It has a library. We provided books. So this also was not about how the prison is. It was about a political decision, and a decision to strip him of every single right and everything that would help him cope with the prison. And therefore, we don't know if he has been moved to the new prison, Wadi Natron prison complex, which has recently opened in Egypt, and they have had a video clip specifically made for it. They made so much PR about how this is such a great accomplishment and everyone should be celebrating it. And it's supposed to have a lot of services and facilities, but we don't know if he'll get access to them or not. But for sure, his transfer is in response to the pressure that has been generated here by everyone, so thank you everyone. It's been something we've been trying to do for more than 2 years. And definitely, at least the fact that he's away from the officers who were responsible for his torture, and the other officer who just assaulted him physically 3 weeks ago, is a relief. But we don't know yet whether he'll be allowed books, whether he'll be allowed time out, as per the law. But he gets to sleep on a bed.
For the first time in 3 years.
And listen, I'm sorry to ask.
He was deprived of everything. Of reading
like
materials,
the concrete floor.
right? Yeah. He was even deprived, to give you a sense of it, he was even not allowed to have a clock because he's not allowed to be aware of the time of the day. So
this is serious psychological torture.
Yes.
And I'm sorry to get onto this, but in response to this, he's been on hunger strike. So I have to ask you both, maybe first, Anna, what kind of condition he's in at the moment?
He's weaker, but here's the thing. The bad conditions that Alaa has been enduring for the past 3 years were really getting into him, especially the deprivation from books. So in October, Alaa expressed suicidal thoughts. So we were really worried about his psychological well-being, which is something very, very new to us. Although we've been through this hell ride, we've never reached that point. So yes, he's weak with the strike, but something happened when Alaa decided to go on a hunger strike. And psychologically, he is in a much better place the moment he decided to be resilient about what's happening to him. So although I hear that he's become weaker and we're worried for him, but there is a camera in his cell. This is of course something that would be worrying in normal conditions, but in our condition I feel this is something that gives us relief, because if he happens to kind of faint or drop unconscious, they should know immediately.
Yes.
And there is a seemingly equipped hospital in this new American-style prison complex.
This is how they call it, by the way. This is not our description. This is their promotion of it.
Description of it, the complex. So he is in a contained environment and he's being resilient, and this is very relieving for us.
We feel like Alaa has decided that he wants an end to all of this, and that he wants the end to be navigated or guided by him, rather than just imposed on his body. And so we feel that he has decided to take this hunger strike till the end. Either it pushes us enough to do enough work, and it triggers enough pressure to actually get him out of this endless loop of prisons in Egypt and Sisi's prisons, or end his life. So it is very alarming, and it is obviously adding a ticking, timer on us, but it also really is compared to where he was in September and October, it's just being resilient.
So a couple of times you said us, and we're talking about the people in this room, and of course people watching on Zoom as well. I hope welcome to all of you as well. Now you discovered, I think relatively late on, that he had British citizenship or could have British citizenship. So the first thing, talking about a different us, what could Britain be doing to help Alaa?
Britain has been doing enough. They would have gotten consular access.
You've been
Britain
sitting
has
here
been
now,
doing
maybe.
enough. Alaa would be here with us. Britain is capable of resolving this issue. But what we get from the embassy, we don't get details. This is how it works, I think, in Britain. They wouldn't let us in into the details, but it looks like, from what we're getting from the embassy, that they're working on it. So they are taking the case, but are they taking it with enough urgency? Are they aware that the other party is unreasonable and very, very stubborn?
So, if by some sort of alchemy you could bring the ambassador into this room and he was sitting there, what would you tell him that he should be doing right now? Both
It's not the ambassador. It's not the ambassador. I think it needs the foreign secretary. It needs.
All right, Liz Truss is there. Just like that.
Okay, so actually, I've been sort of trying to do that on Twitter. Why isn't the UK government being assertive enough on getting Alaa out of prison? This is their political and legal right. We are not talking about something that hasn't been done before. The US have done it. France just did it. So.
And Egypt is supposed to be a relatively friendly country.
Absolutely
it's not like going to the Kremlin.
Not just relatively, absolutely friendly country. They are now discussing COP27 together. There are visits coming back and forth from government officials in London.
We're talking about allies here.
Yeah,
allies,
exactly.
Very strong allies.
Why do you think there is a reluctance or been a failure by the British government?
I think it has two reasons. The noise maybe is not it's not enough, because you have to think of the other party. The other party is insane that you can have the president and decide to have a personal issue with a family, and we know that. Like, it's not that we assume or presume. We do know that it's personal, and so you need enough noise and you need enough political will. You actually need, kind of Boris Johnson talking to Sisi and Liz Truss talking to Sameh Shukri. You need the thing.
I'm not sure you want Boris Johnson to
During these days in particular.
I think Nazanin's counteractive.
I don't think it's very counterintuitive how they operate back in Egypt. The bully mentality they have. You know how bullies can be reckless and therefore can discover new ways. I think politicians, whenever they negotiate, they assume that there are stuff untold, like there are stuff that are givens. So the given here is that, for example, and I was in America and I did some meetings, and I got the same sense also still from, because we're getting support from other countries, but it's not enough, and that the way they go about it is, I don't think it's right. They don't understand the bully mentality, the reckless bully mentality we have back home. So under the table negotiations do not work until you wave of publicity, because otherwise this other party will not take you seriously enough. Although you're Britain, although you're America, no, that's not enough. That shouldn't be a given. So
it does really require a much bigger movement in this country first.
And it requires Britain to be willing to go public about it a little bit, not just to stuff under the table. And it requires Britain to put some money on it, because there are many dealings happening because of the UN climate conference that is supposed to happen in Egypt in November. Britain is offering a lot of support. It requires Britain to put some, because you're not dealing here with a human rights issue that is only in the human rights realm of things. We're dealing with a personal issue with a president. And when we talk about this kind of dictatorship, personal issues do actually matter. They have a big impact on things. It's not like things are structured in the state, so actually they can dictate a lot of decisions.
Let's just kind of, as it were, take a couple of steps backward, because Alaa he's a democracy campaigner. We know he's against the dictatorship and the authoritarian regime. Tell us a little bit, Mona, about how you would describe his personal philosophy. What are his politics? Put it that way.
Well, he calls what I do cute activism. So and he was like, "Why are you in Egypt? Go to the UK where your cute activism might do something." So that tells you a bit about our differences.
At a point in Egypt, there is no, like, the political spectrum is so close that you don't actually have space to even understand or explore your politics. We're only trying to negotiate a space to have political conversation.
And not just that, the basic preservation of, you know, the life and human dignity. Like, you are fighting for the bare basics for survival for everyone. So we are not even in a place where you can discuss anything beyond that.
So, for example, Alaa would personally have. So you can say that Alaa, for example, is secular, but this is not what Alaa is talking about now, because we're in a very basic stage before. So I think in his writings, at least the stuff that are not the international stuff, but the stuff that are related to Egypt, Alaa is always talking about how we have to kind of unite to find the common ground where the human body, the dignity of your human body is preserved. Just the common ground to kind of start to have a political realm or territory, you know.
I'm going to open this up to questions in a moment. Before I do, just one final point, and I'm here as an interviewer, not as a bookseller. However, in terms of the writing, is there something particularly you'd point people at in this lovely book when they go and buy it and pick it up afterwards?
So في حاجة in particular to point it out في الكتاب أنا ممكن أقول.
I can read
Would you do that? That would be fantastic if you could read it.
Sanaa would read a bit, but I also wanted to say, I think, to understand. So Alaa spent 5 years in prison. He finished a full sentence of 5 years, and he was released in March 2019 before he was rearrested again in September. To understand why, I personally think that they were so angry, that the regime was so angry that his voice was not broken and that he was still having an independent and sound mind, and that he was willing to, that he was particularly interested in engaging with things to do with prison and how things are being run in prison, regardless of who the prisoners are. So in 2019, there are two articles. One of them is 5 metaphors for ta'afi, recovery. What was it? Healing. 5 metaphors for healing. It's a personal favorite of mine. And the other one is interestingly a very long one about what it is to be a prisoner deprived of will and facing like your health getting degraded. It was particularly around the death of Mohamed Morsi while he was in prison, the ex-president, the outset president or whatever. So these are two important bits in 2019 that tells you why, or I think why.
Right, well, we're going to hear Sanaa reading something from this book, and then any questions you might have. Thank you very much.
So, I would say the book is, I think it would be interesting for an English reader, not just because of, I think the way Alaa faces our defeat as a movement is very bold. He thinks there is value in facing it, in understanding the moment of possibility back in 2011 and in facing the defeat. And therefore, I think it could be very inspiring. You could learn something from our story as someone who have not yet been defeated, who comes from a different context. So, given that, I'll read from a piece that's called a portrait of an activist outside of his prison that was written in March 2017. It was leaked from inside prison. I read the last bit. It's over, we have been defeated, and meaning has been defeated with us. And just as we were in every step affected by the world and affecting it, so was our defeat both a symptom and a cause of a wider war on meaning. A war on the crime of people searching for a supranational public sphere where they might find intimacy, exchange, communication, even quarrels. that allow a common understanding of reality and multiple dreams of alternative worlds. I'm in prison because the regime wants to make an example of us, so let us be an example, but of our own choosing. The war on meaning is not yet over in the rest of the world. Let us be an example, not a warning. Let's communicate with the world again, not to send distress signals, nor to cry over ruins or spilled milk, but to draw lessons, summarize experiences, and deepen observations. May it help those struggling in the post-truth era. For me, I gained nothing from a decade of rage except for some simple lessons. Most importantly, that every step of debate and struggle in society is a chance to understand, a chance to network, a chance to dream, a chance to plan. Even if things appear simple and indisputable, and we aligned early on with one side of a struggle or abstained early from it altogether, seizing such opportunities to pursue and produce meaning remains a necessity. Without it, we will never get past defeat. I've learned that the ruling regime is just an obstacle. The real challenges are international in nature, so seizing opportunities for debate becomes even more important when the conflict relates to issues that transcend national borders. Finally, siding with the stronger party is generally not useful. The powerful need nothing from you but to parrot their propaganda. The weak often cause as much trouble as they suffer. Their arguments and discourses are often as brittle as their positions in society and their diminishing chances of safety and survival. Taking their side, therefore, even as an experiment, stimulates deeper reflection, investigation, analysis, and imagination. We were defeated, and meaning was defeated with us. But we have not perished yet, and meaning has not been killed. Perhaps our defeat was inevitable, but the current chaos that is sweeping the world will sooner or later give birth to a new world, a world that will of course be ruled and managed by the victors, but nothing will constrain the strong, nor shape the margins of freedom and justice, nor define spaces of beauty and possibility for a common life except the weak, who clung to their defense of meaning even after defeat.
So there we have a universal message from the abnormally eloquent and courageous man. We are living, as we all know, through extremely dangerous and troubling times in many ways. But the flip side is that they do throw up heroes. Not very often at Westminster where I work, but elsewhere. And we're here to celebrate, discuss, and in due course organise for a hero. Any questions you might have, just put up a hand. There is a microphone here, and so you can be picked up. There's a gentleman here at the back, if that's all right.
That was an extraordinary piece of writing and thinking. Thank you very much. Where on earth did he learn to write like that?
Prison?
He reads a lot.
Does he write in English? Or, no, sorry.
No.
Is that translated? Or?
Translated.
Most of the work is translated. Some of the articles written were in English. So he writes in both languages. He was mostly focused on writing in Arabic because he was mostly focused about talking with us. But there are a few pieces, the Guardian, and a few pieces, and the one that was done for RightsCon, the one where actually the title of the book is from was written originally in English by him in prison, and it was published by us. But this is a collection of his writings by friends and family, and mostly edited by our cousin over there, Omar. It's the campaign is a family operation. So we have a cousin selling the books, a cousin making the books, another friend who's like a family, another sister opening up her house, and so it's a big family operation, and all of it is and most of it is translated works.
I feel like so I spent my 20s living in Cairo and reporting on many of the instances that Alaa talks about from the sort of 2006 era. Normally when we come to events like this, we talk about us and them, as in us being in the UK and Western countries and them being abroad. We're, at the moment, you guys are here in the UK, we live in London, we look at issues such as a new law on protesting, on the defunding of DFID and BBC. I feel like now is a good time to reflect on learnings from Egypt and the Middle East in general. And I've been really, really curious to know what you guys would say now, like, what do we do if we haven't been defeated yet? And what would Alaa say that we should be doing?
To sum it up, he has a piece here where he basically says, fix your democracy. How to help is actually fix your democracy. He talks about it like in more details, but the kind of relationships that Western governments have with Egypt, and therefore create the kind of oppressive state we have, wouldn't exist if you continue on your more local struggles and you fix your democracy. If your democracies are fixed, these kind of relationships wouldn't exist, and therefore we would get like a breathing room to actually impose democracy in our countries.
Yeah, Abd el-Fattah al-Sisi wouldn't have managed to get away with this record of crimes and human rights violations if it wasn't for the support of Western governments, and the UK is one of them. So I feel like, and it's very obvious.
And it's also a lot of taxpayers' money being spent on military aid or anti-terrorism aid that is basically being used on people like Alaa or me, for example. So
Well, that's a really, really powerful and important message for us. Fix your democracy first. I'm absolutely sure that political corruption, the misuse of language, lying, use of big money to corrupt political decisions, that spreads very fast, and it spreads inside a democracy, and then it spreads through all the network of relationships the democracy has elsewhere. So I think look in the mirror is a very, very good place to start. Gentleman here. No women asking questions yet. Ah, yes, there is one at the back. Thank goodness for that. Okay, you next.
Hi. Is that
Yeah.
cutting out?
Yeah.
Just quite a specific question, actually. On the issue of Alaa getting British citizenship, I know that quite a few other Egyptian activists who have dual citizenship, were kind of enticed to abandon their Egyptian citizenship, and as sort of a price for basically being allowed out of prison, effectively. Is this anything that's been like discussed with the family at all? And what do you think what's his? I don't know if you know his position on this.
We know.
How do you think? Yeah, right. So what's his sort of views on that?
We have a clear position on that as a
Ultimately,
family.
this is the solution, but Egypt has to allow you, Egypt has to want you to, and then allow you to renounce. So ultimately, yes, we understand that this is the more rational solution. This is not what we're advocating, because we shouldn't be doing their work. Once they feel pressured enough, this will be the offer probably on the table. But for now, this is not even being negotiated or offered.
But we've cleared this with Alaa, and we are very clear, and we've made it very clear for the UK government, and when we talked to the ambassador, that if the dual citizenship is a hurdle in them saving Alaa, then we'll definitely let go of the citizenship, of the Egyptian citizenship. There's no hesitancy about it. There's no use holding on to a citizenship that means you stay, buried in a prison forever and ever, away from your son who is growing up and who's now very soon becoming a teenager, away from your father. So we have no qualms about it, and we are very clear about it, and we were very clear about it to both. So the Egyptian, we haven't spoken directly to the Egyptian government, but in every possible means of communication we managed to say that very clearly, and we definitely said that very clearly to the consular team in Cairo and to the ambassador.
Next question, please.
Every day there is a number that you put in there, how many days he's on hunger strike. And I think for me, the key thing is, today is 53 days, right? It's 53 days he's on hunger strike. And I just feel this has to be the core and the crux of the whole thing. How long or how much will it take any government to actually act on somebody who's stripped of his life basically, of his access to
Yes,
life, to
yes.
living. It's 53 days. Can we imagine if we fast for a day or 2 or 5 days? I mean, it's 53 days in complete hunger strike, right?
Yes, he's on water and salts only.
What will it take? What will it take? Do we sit in front of the parliament? Do we do, big demonstrations? What do we do?
We as a family here are, first of all, on very unfamiliar ground. We are dealing with a totally different context. We don't have the luxury of the time that usually these things take to build up. So all of a sudden we needed to learn, political wording and how, and I needed to engage with a parliamentary machinery, and I've been like dying to do that back in Egypt. Nobody has been giving me a chance. So what we would want and what we would encourage is for everyone who can think of anything to take on Alaa's case as their own. So if you think you can pressure an MP, write them. If you can think you can organize a solidarity event, whatever it is, as long as it doesn't put any of you in danger or threat, please do so. If you are Egyptians and returning to Egypt, please don't do so. We know that we know how this turns out, or at least please consider not to do so. I'm not going to be dictating to people what they should do or should not do.
Yeah, and if you think there is a more efficient way for us to go about it, then please advise.
Yeah, please advise. Please take the lead.
Next question, please.
Thank you so much. Honestly, it's so emotional just hearing this. As an Egyptian, I've got family back home in prison as well, but I really, really pray and hope, and we're doing our best to get Alaa, and I really hope that the next event you have here, Alaa will be sitting here, inshallah.
I hope your family is also there. Family member gets also released.
Hopefully, fingers crossed. It's really interesting what you said, Sanaa, about the common ground and how the political space in Egypt is completely stifled. Exactly what you're saying about, basic human rights, freedom. It's an abstract concept. It's not even something you can discuss. But I'm really interested, with your own experience, because you were in prison yourself, and Alaa currently. Has there been any sort of conversations in prison with perhaps becoming a new sort of that common ground, if you will, like, bridging ideas, etc.? And the second question as well, like, just in your conversations with MPs, and officials that you've had, is there a particular action that they've said that, you've noticed has had an impact? Is it people writing to their MPs that we can sort of do more of, I guess? So that's my two questions.
I'll answer the second one, but you can do the options.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, I don't know, but the females are different than the males. The dynamics in female prisons are different. So in my experience, they put two girls with me in the same cell who were on Muslim brother cases. One of them wasn't actually a Muslim brother, one was. And the rationale they had was that they thought I was supposed to be in solitary, like my papers said so. And so they thought this would actually create more trouble. We became friends. We're three of us in the same room. We have to become friends. We genuinely became friends, and we also we were very aware that our interests lie on us being together. So we tried not to get into the stuff that would show the difference. We both avoided the differences, but it's not a political conversation, because it's more of a common ground of we all need this common ground of dignity and human dignity for the body, and to kind of not have this prison ghost lying around all the time. So that's what we had. But the other problems were still very obvious. My main issue with Muslim Brotherhood is
sectarian violence.
Yes, it's not just Muslim Brotherhood. It's a lot in the culture, in the Egyptian culture. So, for example, we were such supporters of each other that if something bad happens to me, they would both put themselves in high risk, absolutely high risk for me. But they wouldn't eat, for example, from my visit, because the one who cooks at our house is Christian. So I understand that there are places we cannot we come from absolutely different worlds, and the words we both want are absolutely different. But for now, they are victims. For now, they are victims of human rights, of huge violations and violations. So if what I'm facing is oppression, what they face is like 10 times. So I have to kind of, I see them from that point of view, but I don't think there will be common ground, at least with this sector. But there must be common ground for us to find a path to have a democratic country where everybody can
live and be different. Yeah. Actually, about Alaa, regarding this, Alaa was placed in maximum security prison in a ward that is assigned for ISIS and Qaeda and Hasm. And I think the mentality behind that decision was actually to isolate him, so to put him with people who he wouldn't find common grounds with. And it tells you a lot about how they are incapable of understanding Alaa in particular, because he is one of the most people I know, not who try to find a common ground with everyone, but who try to open a conversation with anyone who's willing to open a conversation. And so they were surprised that one of the prison Alaa was in maximum security. Most of the prisoners are not allowed family visits. So they rely on talking to each other through the walls in getting updates about what's happening outside, with the very few people who either gets visits or go to trials. And they started this sort of radio-like social thing at night where they each share news, and then they have different kind of topics to discuss. And Alaa was telling us about how he was trying to find something in common, and so he had 2 lectures with them, one about the history of science and like the impact of old Arab scientists and their impact in the evolvement of science across the world, and the other one was that he was trying to make a discussion about a common collective history. So he was trying to focus on the movement of human rights in Egypt, and like from different groups. So in a way, Alaa is trying to use whatever space there is to open a conversation with anyone, and again, as I said, with the state as well. But because of that, obviously, they have also emptied all cells next to him, so he'd have only the 2 cellmates he was with. That was before his transfer, to stop this kind of communication. And whenever they transferred him to court, they would take him in one truck, isolated from the others, even if he's going to the same court with them. So this is part of why they are obsessively targeting Alaa and trying to isolate him, because he insists on opening conversations with everyone all the time.
Opening conversations. We've got another question here, and then one at the back.
Thank you to both of you for coming in. Obviously, Andrew mentioned at the start, there's all sorts of political troubles all over the world at the moment. What would you say to someone or to a family who are thinking of setting out on a sort of political dissidence course now, whether looking to speak out against a regime or they feel really compelled to do something?
Sure, I think I'm the expert on family, yes. She's the expert on prison, I'm the expert on family.
Have very good sisters, I would think.
I don't know, I think you, or how I feel about it is you kind of don't have a choice. When you are, it's not as if we are choosing to be, 24/7 everyday activists and human rights defenders. Well, we chose to be engaged, but we did not choose to be completely devoted to this. It's one of us is under extreme danger. The escalations of violations against him is continuing, and the violence unleashed on him and on us is beyond our imagination. It's a survival thing. So I think if a family in the same situation as ours, they won't have a choice but to fight back. We are lucky enough to have a wide network of support. We are lucky that we are all active, so we all sort of discuss and agree on tactics together most of the time, not all the time. And so yeah, I feel like what I would say is just look for other, look for networks of support. look for other families who have been through this. The first person I met, not sure if he's still here or if he left, but the first person I met when I arrived in London and I was feeling so lost about what to do was Richard Radcliffe. And actually I was here for just a week. I wasn't planning to do meetings. I was leaving Sanaa to handle all of this in any country. I just came to do some practical stuff and go back to Egypt. And then I sat with him and we talked, and he told me about the campaign for Nazanin and about like how things worked and who helped and what helped. And I feel particular affiliation with families of prisoners, أهالي معتقلين. It's how I define myself for the past couple of years. And like, it was supposed to be a 1-hour meeting. He graciously gave us 3 hours and we sat and we talked. And at the end of it, I remember at the end of it, I turned around to our friends and family. I was like, I want to extend my stay. I want to talk to people. I will start. So reach out for people who have been through this, just to guide you. And the moment you reach out, you'll find a lot of people helping, obviously.
Last question.
It's quite extraordinary the Foreign Secretary is yet to comment. We've had hardly any comment in public, so I would urge you, short, sharp letters to your members of parliament, anybody you know in the political system. We really need to dial up the amount of anger about this and actually make it a domestic issue, because I think otherwise, I'm afraid, with everything else going on and the transactional nature of foreign policy at the moment, there's not going to be much shift in the Foreign Office. So really I hope you can all write to your MPs. Please do that. That would really help. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm very clear at Westminster there's going to be a big crisis about Boris Johnson and the Sue Gray report, and we'll really be talking about the condition of our democracy and whether rules are adhered to and whether people survive or don't. I don't know what's going to happen. I do know that nobody is going to be killed because of that. And throughout all of this, there'll be a kind of quiet patting of backs about we are, in the end, when all push comes to shove, we are a proper, open, democratic society. And none of that really means anything unless we support those values around the world. And we support Nazanin and Vladimir and Ale. And that is really, really important. We still do have a system where politicians are responsive to public pressure. And I would urge everybody, first of all, to put every pressure you can, whether it's in demonstrations or writing for Ali's case. He's a very, very important voice that not just Egypt, but the rest of us, the world, cannot lose. And secondly, go and buy the book. Thank you all very much.